Hi there, my name is Emma, and in today's video, we are going to learn some great expressions with the word thank you or thanks in them. So many of you know the word thank you, but did you know the expressions thanks anyway, or thank you though, or thanks but no thanks? Even though these expressions have the word thank you or thanks in them, they actually have a different meaning than thank you. So in today's lesson, I'm going to teach you the many different meanings of these words. So let's get started by talking about the most basic, which you probably already know, which is thank you. So thank you is one of the most common expressions we use in English. What does it mean? Well, we use it when someone helps us or does something nice for us. How do we use it? Well, we can just say thank you. We can say thank you very much. Or if there is something specific we want to thank a person for, we can say thank you for something. So for example, thank you for your help. Thank you for the gift. Thank you for coming to my party. So this is, again, one of the most common things we use in English. And the answer to thank you in English is you're welcome, or it's no problem. Well, sometimes we might want to speak a little bit more informally, especially if we're talking with our friends or our family. So another way to say thank you is to say thanks. So notice we don't have you after that. We just say thanks with an S. Again, this is not formal. So I usually don't use this in writing business emails or, business letters. It's informally used often with friends and family. So how do we use this? Well, for example, I can use it on its own, like thanks. Or if there's something specific I want to say thank you for, I can say thanks for something. So for example, thanks for your help. Thanks for the gift. Thanks for coming. So these are the most common expressions using thank or thank you. Now let's look at some of the other expressions I mentioned, including thanks anyway, thanks though, and thanks but no thanks. Okay, so we've just talked about the expressions thank you and thanks. And we're going to look at some more thank expressions. But before we do that, I just wanted to call your attention to the TH in thanks and thank you, and thanks anyway. Many students have trouble with TH. It's a difficult sound. In English, when we pronounce TH, our tongue has to come a little out of our mouth and touch our top teeth. So I'll show you what this looks like. Notice my tongue comes out and it touches the top teeth. So when I am pronouncing thanks, I want you to pay attention to what my mouth is doing, because this can help your pronunciation too. If you don't say thanks, it might sound like tanks, which is a totally different word that has different meanings. So let's now look at the next expression that has the word thanks in it. We have thanks anyway, or thanks anyways. So I'll tell you the difference between these two in a moment. But first, let's talk about thanks anyway. What does this mean? It has a different meaning than thank you. When we say thanks anyway, we use this when we ask someone for help and they can't give us the help we need. So for example, maybe you go to a store and you ask where they, keep the apples. You want to buy apples, you say, "Oh, hi, I'd like to buy some apples. Where are the apples?" And maybe the store has no apples. So they say, "Sorry, we're out of apples, no apples today." Your response would be, "Oh, thanks anyway." So again, you didn't get the help you wanted, but you still, in English, will say something like, "Thanks anyway." So let's look at another example of this. So we have here Jack and Jill. So Jack and Jill are friends. Jack says to Jill, "Hey Jill, can you drive me to the airport?" And Jill says, "I can't. My car is at the mechanic." So this means Jill's car is not working. It's at the mechanic to get fixed. So Jill doesn't have her car. So what does Jack say? Well, Jack says, "Oh, thanks anyway." Did Jill actually help Jack? No, Jill did not help Jack. But Jack still says, "Thanks anyway." Okay. So what about thanks anyways? You might hear English speakers say this. Thanks anyway is the more formal or more correct expression. But if you like slang, and I love slang, you might actually say thanks anyways, which is just the informal way or the more slang version of thanks anyway. So you can use either of these. This is a little bit more formal, and this is more slang. All right, so now let's look at some other expressions. Let's look at thanks though and thanks but no thanks. Okay, so our next expression might be a little difficult for some of you to pronounce. And that's because thanks though has two THs in it. So if you have trouble with the TH sound, this expression might be a little more difficult for you. So it's an important expression. We use it a lot in conversation. What does it mean when we say thanks though? Well, before we get to the meaning, I just want to focus a little bit on the pronunciation. You might already know this, but in English, OUGH has different ways we can pronounce it depending on the word. In this word, though, it sounds just like the letter O, though. So even though you have this 4 letters, this is how I would spell it for pronunciation reasons. The real spelling is this one, of course. So if you're writing it, write this, but this is what the pronunciation would look like, though. So thanks, though, what does it mean? Well, we use it when someone wants to help us. They offer us something. Maybe they try to give us something, or maybe they want to do something for us, but we don't want the help. For different reasons, maybe we don't need the help, maybe we actually don't want the help. But the problem is we can't just say, "No, I don't want your help," or "No, I don't want that. I don't need that." If you say this, it might sound a little rude and impolite. So thanks, though, is the polite way to say, "I don't want the help or your offer." So let's look at an example of this. So we have here our good friend Mickey. Mickey says to Minnie, "Hey Minnie, can I buy you a coffee?" Well, Minnie already has a coffee. She knows she has a coffee at her office, so she doesn't want the coffee. So instead of saying, "I don't want a coffee," which might sound a little rude, Minnie says, "I have one, so I have a coffee. Thanks though." So you see, thanks though means You appreciate the offer even though you're not taking the offer. Let's look at a couple more examples of thanks though. All right, so now let's look at some more examples of the word thanks though. So we have here Barbie, and what does Barbie say? Well, Barbie says to Ken, her boyfriend, she says, "I'm going to the beach. Want to come?" Well, Ken, unfortunately, doesn't want to come. So what does he say? He wants to be polite. He can't say, I don't want to go, Barbie. So what does he say? He says, "Oh, I can't. I have work. Thanks, though, for the invite." So again, this is where something is offered. In this case, Barbie offers Ken an invitation to the beach. Ken doesn't or can't go, so he says, "I can't. I have work. Thanks, though." Now we have Tony and Jen. Tony is at Jen's house, and he sees Jen cooking, and he says, "Can I give you a hand with dinner?" This means, can I help you make dinner? And Jen says, "It's already cooking. Thanks, though." So Jen is not taking Tony's help. You know, it could be true. Dinner's already cooking. She doesn't need his help. So Tony offered. Jen refuses the help. So she uses thanks, though. So now let's look at another example of an expression with thanks. We're going to now look at thanks, but no thanks. Okay. So this might be the funniest expression I'm going to teach you today. The expression is thanks, but no thanks. So you have to be careful with this expression. And the reason is it has multiple meanings. So it has different meanings, and you can usually tell the meaning based on a person's voice or their tone. So how they say it. So I'm going to give you some examples of thanks, but no thanks. So the first meaning is a little impolite. So I would not use this with my boss. I might not, it depends on the situation, but it can sound rude. So you have to be careful. And it means a strong rejection. So this means you're really saying no. Okay, it's a very strong no. So let me give you an example. So for some people, they are afraid of bugs and insects and spiders. Ugh. That's how some people feel about bugs and insects. So nowadays, some people actually might cook using insects like grasshoppers and crickets. So imagine this. We'll go back to Jen and Tony. Jen says, "Oh, I cooked a dish with insects. I cooked some food with grasshoppers in it. Do you want some?" And Tony, who does not like insects and thinks that they're gross, says, "Ugh, thanks, but no thanks." So this is a strong rejection. He's saying, no, absolutely not. Again, tone is important. You can also use this when you're telling a story about something that happened, and you want to show to your audience or the listener that you didn't like something. So for example, imagine you have a teacher and your teacher gives you homework on Christmas. You might say to your friends, "Ugh, my teacher wants us to study and do our homework on Christmas. Thanks, but no thanks." So again, it has a little bit of attitude. Thanks, but no thanks. So again, this expression shows that you disagree with something strongly. Now, we can also use this thanks but no thanks a little bit more politely, but again, it depends on our voice and on our tone and the situation. If my mother says, "Emma, do you want a little bit more salad?" I might say, "Thanks but no thanks." And because of the way I use my voice, it doesn't sound rude. So your tone for this word or this expression really matters. If my mom offers me salad and she says, Emma, do you want some salad? And I say, oh, Mom, thanks, but no thanks. Then that's a strong rejection. So it depends on how you say it. Now, one more thing I want to add is thanks, but no thanks is a funny expression. And so it's actually been made into many GIFs, or some people will pronounce this as GIFs, or memes. So if you're somebody that likes to use memes and GIFs, you can search thanks but no thanks and see many different examples of GIFs using this. All right, well, so let's now look at some examples of all of these, and let's practice using them in some actual questions. All right, so let's practice what you have learned. So I have here 3 questions, and I want you to fill in the blanks with either thanks though, thanks anyway, thanks but no thanks, or just thanks or thank you. So think about the context and the situation and which answer is the most appropriate. So my first question, George says to his friend Sheila, hey, I have an extra movie ticket. Do you want it? And Sheila says, no, I have work tonight. So what does Sheila say? Thanks, though. So again, thanks, though, we use when we are offered something, but we don't want it, or we can't use it. So I'd say thanks, though. Okay. So our next question. The president wants to raise taxes by 500%. So, what do the people say? Are the people happy with this? I don't think so. I think the people would be very angry, and they would probably show a strong rejection. So what do you think the people will say? Thanks, but no thanks. So the people say, thanks, Mr. President, but no thanks. So thanks, but no thanks. Okay, so our final example, Paul from the Beatles asks Ringo to play at his concert. And Paul's very excited. He says, Ringo, can you play at my concert? But Ringo, unfortunately, is busy. He's having dinner with the Queen of England, so he can't make it. So Ringo says, no, sorry, I can't. What does Paul say? So again, Ringo's not helping him with the concert. So Paul would say, thanks anyway, because he's not getting the help he's asking for. Thanks anyway. But he still wants to be polite. And there you have it. So for more practice, you can come visit our website at www.engvid.com, and there you will find a longer quiz where you can practice everything you learned in this video, all the different expressions we covered. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to ring the bell to see new content. We're frequently coming up with new videos on grammar and vocabulary and pronunciation, conversation, and so much more. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.